Yesterday was the one day of the year when we revel in the spooky, the paranormal, the alien. But apparently there are some in this province who dabble in such things every day. With us now to explain from our studio at Confederation College in Thunder Bay, our Northwestern Ontario Hub journalist John Thompson, and from our studio at Queen's University in Kingston, David Rockne Corrigan, our Eastern Ontario Hub journalist. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, Jeyan.
Thanks for having us, Jeyan.
All right, so David, you had a bit of fun. You went on a ghost hunt with a paranormal investigator. What was that experience like?
So, Jeyan, I have a pretty cool job, I must recognize that. I got to travel west to Peterborough the other day to hang out with someone who has an even cooler job. She's a paranormal investigator. Her name's Mandy Rose, and she runs a little outfit in Peterborough called Paranormal Peterborough. And she's been ghost hunting for about 15 years. She was inspired around 2004 when she was walking through the Peterborough lift lock, and her and a friend heard some footsteps coming up the staircase towards them, but they looked down and there was nobody there. So they bolted, and she says she wasn't as brave back then, but it inspired her to start ghost hunting. So she's a personal support worker during the day, and at night she moonlights as a paranormal investigator. So I went and hung out with her and her investigative assistant, Sam, at the Peterborough lift lock, which they tell me is one of Peterborough's most haunted spots. And they tell me that there's a ghost there named Arthur who apparently worked there and died of a heart attack, and can still be heard sometimes by the employees there. So they often will say, "Hi, Art," when they get to work. But unfortunately, I didn't see any or witness or hear any ghostly presence when I was at the Peterborough lift lock. But maybe next time.
I did hear that you may have heard some screaming or something like that. Was that true, and you guys thought it was a ghost?
Well, we heard some screaming. It turned out to be just a screaming teenager with her friends having a laugh. And the lift lock actually is joined up with the Hunter Street Tunnel. And so we heard lots of car horns and engines, but unfortunately, no ghosts.
All right. Now, a surprising number of Canadians actually believe in ghosts, don't they?
Yes, and actually the Angus Reid Institute was able to put some numbers on this in 2016. They found that 30% of Canadians believe that people who die with unfinished business on Earth can remain here as spirits. So 30% of Canadians believe that. A further half of women believe that people can communicate with those spirits, and about a quarter of men believe that. So it does break down a little bit on gender there as well. But yes, a lot of people, a lot of Canadians do believe that ghosts are real and that you can communicate with them.
But still, so that studies have 30% who believe. There's a pretty big chunk that don't believe in them, right?
Yes, and of course, you know, we would be remiss here at TVO if we didn't introduce a little bit of critical thinking to this segment. I spoke with a philosopher, Christopher DiCarlo, who also runs a consulting firm called Critical Thinking Solutions, and he laughs at the notion of paranormal investigators and ghost hunting. You know, he says that it's a recipe perhaps for fraud and exploitation. You know, somebody who's wants to maybe believe that that their grandmother, you know, is trying to communicate with them, but maybe it's really just a creaking board in the attic. So I just wanted to introduce a little bit of critical thinking to this and show that yes, not everybody believes, but a healthy number of people do.
All right, very interesting stuff. I'm going to jump over to John. John, you looked at UFOs in the Thunder Bay area. Why does Northwestern Ontario seem so ideal for close encounters with UFOs?
Well, that's actually a myth, I think, Jeyan. You would think that more rural, perhaps even in this country, more northern folks might have more UFO encounters, but experts on this topic say the opposite is true. It basically is, it's consistent with population. And so you are more likely where you live to run into somebody who has had a UFO experience than I am. That said, when you have had a UFO experience in a small town, there's a degree of complexity that comes with the community of that. There's a lot of ridicule that happens. We've spoken to authors and documentarians and people who've had those experiences who say that they have faced a lot of ridicule at the hands of their communities. And the other half of it is those people who do that work saying of their friends and family members and neighbors who they know closely and have to endure that ridicule, why would they lie?
I'm curious, what do these sightings look like? Is it something in the sky? Is it something on the ground? What is it?
When you look back to 1914, which was the first sighting in Thunder Bay that was reported in a newspaper over Fort William First Nation and Mount McKay, all the way to now, it's very, very diverse. A lot of the stuff that we're witnessing lately has to do with orange lights in the sky, smaller craft coming out of bigger craft, if you will. There are people who have allegedly had their hands burned from touching UFOs that were on the ground. There are full-on stories of people being abducted. What's really interesting is that there's this amateur sort of movement around recording these types of sightings and these encounters because there's really no one else doing it, not in a reliable spot anyway.
Now, you both wrote dispassionately about this topic, but viewers may want to know, and I'll start with you, David, do you believe in ghosts?
I want to believe. I don't think I do, but I have a lot of time for people who do, and I think that ghost stories, if they're told well and they got a good ending, then I'm right on board. But I don't think I'm a believer.
All right, and John, do you believe in UFOs and alien beings?
Well, the Canadian government stopped recording UFO sightings and communicating with people who'd seen them in 1995, and perhaps that's a good thing. But I do think that, from the chariots of fire in the Bible and angels all the way to these phenomena experienced today, this is something. Whether it is what it claims to be or what it looks like, I'm not sure if I believe that. But I've been from one side of this province to the other, Jeyan, and I've seen a lot of strange things myself.
Jeyan, is that you?
Oh, sorry, got a little carried away, forgot. Halloween was yesterday. Yeah, don't worry. Again, it's always a pleasure to have you guys on this show. Take care.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.